Okay, so have you ever felt like Bitcoin is this big exclusive club with like a secret handshake or something? Well, today we're going to throw open those doors and show you just how easy it is to get started with Bitcoin. It's way easier than you think, seriously. We're going to walk you through buying your first Bitcoin and, more importantly, how to keep it safe. Think of this as your beginner's guide to becoming a true Bitcoiner.
Yeah, it really is simpler than it seems. I mean, all the jargon can be a bit intimidating, Rose, but at its core, buying and securing Bitcoin is pretty straightforward.
Exactly.
And that's what we're going to focus on in this deep dive. We want to cut through all the noise and give you a clear step-by-step understanding of how it all works.
Okay, so let's say you're ready to jump in and get some Bitcoin. Awesome. But even before we talk about buying, we need to talk about how to keep it safe. It's like getting a super valuable item. Right. The first thing you think about is where you're going to store it so it doesn't get lost or stolen.
Makes sense.
So now, the most common starting point is using what's called a cryptocurrency exchange. These are online platforms where you can buy and sell various digital currencies, like Bitcoin. You've probably heard of Coinbase.com, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's just one example of many out there.
Yeah.
And it's usually where people start their Bitcoin journey.
Exactly. Setting up an account on these exchanges is pretty familiar. You sign up, you might have to verify your identity, and then you'll need to connect a payment method like a credit card or a bank account so you can actually fund your purchases.
Okay, so you've got your account all set up and you've linked your payment method. Now comes the fun part, buying some Bitcoin. You don't have to buy a whole Bitcoin, by the way.
Okay.
Those could be pretty pricey these days. Most platforms let you buy fractions of a Bitcoin. You could start with as little as like $5.
Oh, wow. So you can just dip your toes in.
Yeah. You usually see a clear trade or buy option.
Yeah.
Just enter the amount of dollars you want to spend and boom.
I like how flexible it is. That makes Bitcoin accessible to pretty much everyone. And beyond just making a one-time purchase, you can even set up recurring buys. So like a small amount every day, every week, or even every month. It's a strategy called dollar cost averaging.
Ah, yes. Dollar cost averaging. So can you tell us a bit more about that? Why would someone want to use that strategy?
Yeah, sure. So the idea behind dollar cost averaging is basically to avoid trying to time the market.
Yeah.
Because trying to buy Bitcoin when the price is at its lowest is, it's nearly impossible to predict.
You got that right.
So instead, you buy a fixed amount at regular intervals. And this can actually help smooth out the average price you pay over time, reducing the impact of all that price volatility.
That makes a lot of sense. It takes the emotion out of it.
For sure.
Okay, now when you buy Bitcoin on an exchange, there are usually some fees involved.
Oh, right.
So if you buy that $5 worth, you might actually get a little less Bitcoin, maybe closer to $4.
Okay.
Because of a small transaction fee. And these fees can change depending on the exchange and how much you're buying.
Right.
But you'll see the result of your purchase pretty much immediately in your account. Balance on the exchange. And unlike the stock market, which has set hours, the Bitcoin market is open 24/7 globally.
Oh, wow. So it never sleeps.
Never sleeps. All right, so you've bought your first Bitcoin, congrats. But now comes what many consider the most important part, keeping it secure. And this is where a really important saying in the Bitcoin world comes in. Not your keys, not your coin. So what does that actually mean?
Well, think of it this way. When you buy Bitcoin on an exchange, it's kind of like they're holding the keys for you.
Okay.
These keys are actually private codes that let you control and move your Bitcoin. As long as your Bitcoin sits on the exchange, you don't directly control those keys. The exchange does. And if something happens to the exchange, like a hack, a security breach, or even if the platform just shuts down, your Bitcoin could be at risk.
So you're basically saying don't leave your Bitcoin on the exchange.
Exactly. You want to take control of your own keys. And that's where the concept of a Bitcoin wallet comes in. Specifically, a super secure type called a hardware wallet.
Okay, so it's like a real physical wallet.
Kind of. It's a small device. Think of it like a USB stick. And it's designed to store your private keys offline. A popular example is the Ledger Nano S.
So it's like a little vault for your Bitcoin. What makes it so much safer than leaving it on the exchange?
A few things. Most importantly, it encrypts your private keys. So it scrambles the information, and the only way to unscramble it and access your Bitcoin is with the right key, a 24-word recovery passphrase, and a PIN code that you set up. So even if someone stole your hardware wallet, they couldn't get to your Bitcoin without knowing your passphrase and PIN.
Whoa, so that's like way more secure.
Way more secure.
You mentioned some risks of leaving crypto on an exchange. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Why is that not the best long-term strategy?
Sure. So exchanges are big targets for hackers because they hold a ton of cryptocurrency. And while they do invest in security, breaches do happen. Also, in the unlikely event that an exchange has financial troubles or shuts down, getting your Bitcoin back could get really complicated. And unlike traditional bank accounts, cryptocurrency on exchanges usually isn't insured by the government, like by the FDIC.
Okay, so the takeaway is that for true ownership and better security, move your Bitcoin off the exchange and into a wallet where you control those private keys.
Exactly.
Got it. Now, let's say I have a brand new Ledger Nano S. How do I actually transfer my Bitcoin from an exchange like Coinbase.com to this device?
Okay, well, the first step is to use the software that works with your hardware wallet. So for the Ledger Nano S, that would be Ledger Live.
Ledger Live.
Yeah, think of Ledger Live as the control panel for your ledger. Within the software, you'll see options for sending, receiving, and even buying crypto.
And since we want to move Bitcoin into our hardware wallet, we're going to use the receive function in Ledger Live, right?
That's right. So when you select Receive, the software will walk you through generating a unique Bitcoin wallet address that's linked to your Ledger device. This usually involves plugging your Ledger into your computer with a USB cable and entering your PIN directly on the device to confirm it's really you.
Okay.
And once Ledger Live and your device have talked to each other, it's going to display a string of letters and numbers. That's your Bitcoin receiving address. You want to carefully copy this whole address, then head back to the exchange where you bought your Bitcoin. In our example, that's Coinbase.com.
Okay, I'm back on the exchange, I've got my Bitcoin, and now I want to send it to the address I got from my Ledger. What do I do on the exchange?
You'll need to find a send or withdrawal option. And when you start a send, the exchange is going to ask for the recipient's Bitcoin address. That's where you're going to paste the wallet address that Ledger Live gave you. And it's super important to double check that you've copied the entire address correctly. Even one tiny mistake can mean your Bitcoin ends up in the wrong place and you could lose it forever. This is the part where you got to be extra careful, double and triple check that address. Because unlike sending an email, if you get the address wrong, those Bitcoin are gone.
Oh, that's a little scary. So are there any safety nets in place?
Yeah, most reputable exchanges have some confirmation steps. And it's also a good idea to compare the address you pasted on the exchange with the address on your hardware wallet screen if you can. Now remember, all Bitcoin transactions are recorded on this big public ledger called the blockchain. Think of it like a giant public record book that tracks all Bitcoin transactions. So it's really hard to cheat the system. And once a transaction is confirmed on the blockchain, it can't be reversed.
All right, so I pasted the address, and now I need to enter how much Bitcoin I want to send. Earlier, we talked about buying $5 worth, but for this transfer to my hardware wallet, let's say I want to send like $25 worth.
Perfect example. Just like when you bought the Bitcoin, the exchange is probably going to charge a small fee for sending it to an external wallet. And you'll see that fee displayed before you confirm the transaction. These fees can change depending on how busy the Bitcoin network is at that moment.
Interesting. And before I hit send, there's usually one more security step, right? Like a two-factor authentication code.
You got it. Most exchanges use two-factor authentication. It's basically like having a second lock on your account.
Okay.
You need both your password and a special code from an app on your phone to log in or withdraw any funds. This makes it way harder for someone to get into your account, even if they somehow knew your password.
That's good to know. So once I enter that code and I confirm the transaction, the exchange processes the request. I should see a confirmation message, and my Bitcoin balance on the exchange will go down. And then, if all goes well, I should see my Bitcoin balance increase in Ledger Live, reflecting that $25 I just sent.
Exactly. It might take a few minutes, usually, for the Bitcoin network to confirm the transaction, but once it does, you'll see the updated balance in your Ledger Live software. And that's it. Those Bitcoin are now securely stored on your hardware wallet, and you have full control over your private keys. It's like having your money in the bank, but you're the bank.
But you need to keep your hardware wallet device and your recovery passphrase safe.
Yes, very important.
Okay, just to recap, buying Bitcoin on an exchange is easy, but for the best security and true ownership, moving that Bitcoin to a hardware wallet where you control the keys is the way to go.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Keeping Bitcoin on an exchange might seem convenient, but the risks just make self-custody using a hardware wallet the smarter choice, especially if you're in it for the long haul.
Right, and speaking of the long haul, a lot of the sources we looked at really emphasized holding Bitcoin long term. They see it as a smart part of a broader investment strategy. They even talked about stacking sats, bro.
Stacking sats.
Yeah. Sats being short for Satoshis, the smallest unit of a Bitcoin. It's kind of a fun way of saying you're accumulating Bitcoin little by little over time. So you don't have to think about the huge price of a whole Bitcoin. You can just focus on collecting these smaller sats.
Yeah.
It makes getting started feel much more manageable.
I like that. Stacking sats.
Right. Another interesting thing to consider is how what's happening in the traditional financial world sometimes impacts interest in Bitcoin.
That's true.
So, to wrap up our deep dive on buying and securing Bitcoin, the message is clear. Using an exchange like Coinbase.com is a simple way to buy your first Bitcoin. But for true security and control, transfer those Bitcoin to a hardware wallet, manage your own private keys, be your own bank.
Exactly. It might seem like a few extra steps at first, but knowing you have full control over your digital assets, that peace of mind is totally worth it.
Here's a final thought to leave you with. Now that you know how to buy and secure Bitcoin, what does it mean to have this level of control and security in a world where traditional currencies work so differently? What could be the bigger implications of a decentralized digital currency where individuals hold their own keys? It's something to think about.
A lot to consider for sure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Bitcoin.
It's been a pleasure.